What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of In the Heyday. I'm your host, Oliver Hayes. I'm super excited to record this episode because this one is a long time coming. It has been, I believe, 10 or 11 days, a week and a half, something like that, since I recorded my last episode of In the Heyday. And since then, a lot of things have happened. My last episode was recorded after the Northern Colorado game with the instant reactions, but that was the last non-conference game. So Big 12 play has started. The Buffs have improved 2-0, which is a sigh of relief after they started 0-13 last year in conference play and their return to the Big 12. But yeah, 2 wins out of the way, including their first road win, which came in the Big 12 opener on the road against Arizona State. The Buffs eked that one out 95-89 over the Sun Devils. And then they returned home on Wednesday. I'm recording this on, it just became Friday. I'm recording this at midnight on Thursday. But the Buffs on Wednesday beat the Utah Utes 85-73 after returning to the CU Event Center and protected home floor after losing to Northern Colorado, like we established. But either way, like I said, a lot of things have happened, a lot of things to discuss, specifically the zone defense and why the Buffs have been successful with it in Big 12 play, maybe why they didn't bust it out during non-conference play, and why their man defense was such an issue during non-conference play, especially against Northern Colorado, and how their struggles on defense even led to their stymied offense against the Bears to end non-conference play. But either way, the Buffs, their offense has remained pretty solid outside of their 2 losses to Stanford and Northern Colorado. But yeah, the Buffs, they shot under 40% in the Northern Colorado game. I forgot what exactly it was in the Stanford game. But either way, the offense in Big 12 has been solid so far, has looked decent, even though the 3-point shot hasn't necessarily fallen as much as I would have expected throughout this season, but yeah, a decent amount of things to talk about. I'll talk about the individuals that have played so far in Big 12 play, how they've done over the last few games, and then a little bit of preview of Texas Tech, who's ranked number 14, I believe. I'm trying to remember their record. Let's see, they're I got it pulled up. 11-4, 1-1 in conference play. They lost to they lost to Houston by 4 points, but beat Oklahoma State in their Big 12 opener. But either way, I'll get to Texas Tech in a second. And to start, that's bottom thirds. Pull up the stat sheet. I figure I'll talk about why Northern Colorado was able to beat CU. Like I established, the Buffs hadn't gotten to their zone defense quite yet. In Big 12 play, they started playing. They've been pressing throughout non-conference play, kind of on and off, pressing more so when the bench is in the game, especially when they had Isaiah Johnson and Barrington Hargress on the floor at the same time, or Josiah Sanders and Jalen Holland, more of those athletic smaller guards. But either way, the Buffs didn't really, they played a little bit out of press, but didn't show any zone during non-conference play. And they didn't in their last non-conference game against Northern Colorado. They stuck to their man-to-man. That's what Tad Boyle likes to play in his defensive rebound-minded strategy that he has ran in his now 16-year tenure here in Boulder. But the man-to-man defense has not been good for the Buffs. As we have seen this year, the Buffs, they've been giving up over 80 points per game. I'd have to double check that, or somewhere around there. I know it's under there. I think it's around 75, 77 points a game, somewhere around there. But either way, teams are shooting like 47% from the field, also shooting well from the 3-point line, and more specifically, guards have been coming into the CU Event Center and just lighting up the Buffs. Even when the Buffs traveled to Moby Arena and played Colorado State, Josh Passarelli had a huge game, even though he's more of an off guard. And Stanford, Ibuka Okori, he went for a 30-point outburst with a lot of free throws. So the Buffs, they struggled throughout non-conference play to limit the guards. And in this contest against the Bears, it was the exact same as Quinn Danker, a returner who didn't play in last year's contest, which went to double overtime, even though the Buffs won that one. Danker went for 33 points on 12 of 18 shooting from the field, along with 8 rebounds and 8 assists. I know he finished with like 4 or 5 turnovers, but he played a bunch of minutes. I'll click on him just to double check how many minutes he played. Yeah, I mean, he played 38 minutes. The only 2 minutes he was out. The Bears struggled, and I remember noting that in my rewatch. But either way, he played fantastic. Kept up that trend that guards were going to play well against the Buffs, and it was it wasn't necessarily surprising because he came in with great averages. I believe he was averaging like 17 points with a few assists. But Brock Wisney, the returner who had some, I believe all conference honors last year. He's improved a bunch. Tad Boyle has noted that after the game. And he's a big guy. The Bears ran a decent amount of action for him, and I thought he was going to be more of an impact, especially early on when he knocked down a pick and pop 3. Those more mobile big guys have been kind of an issue for the Buffs, especially in the man-to-man defense when there has been a talented guard like Danker. But even though Wisney was kind of taken away, at least from scoring the ball down the stretch, with the Buffs kind of blitzing him in the post, he was setting, solid screens. Egan Shields, who came off the bench, he was a big body, 6'10". I don't know how much he weighs, but he was a hefty dude who could bang around with Elijah Malone, and those two were setting a decent amount of drag screens, which were catching the Buffs off guard, because the Buffs were hoping to it looked like they were trying to blitz Danker. In most cases, that's what they've been trying to do with a lot of guards. But if while it worked a few times, helping turn Danker over, he was able to get outside of those blitzes sometimes, outside of containment, getting to his right hand more often than his left, and getting downhill for some of those scorers, being able to draw fouls. But like I was saying, with the drag screens, that allowed the action to happen a lot quicker for the Bears, and the Buffs trying to scramble. Maybe they had a guy behind the play, or they weren't getting back, or a turnover just happened and they're still scrambling. It allowed the action to happen, whether it was just even though it was just a smooth pick and roll, and Shields and Wisney were able to get open, and Danker was able to get open and score a decent amount of his 33 points off of those drag screens, like I was saying. And so it kind of came down to, a lot of the issues that the Buffs have been experiencing throughout non-conference play in terms of not being able to guard a guy like Danker. I mean, it didn't matter whether it was Barrington Hargress or Isaiah Johnson or Jalen Holland or Josiah Sanders. No matter who was on Danker, he was getting whatever he wanted. I mean, 12 of 18 from the field is pretty efficient, along with 6 free throws on 6 free throw attempts. Let's see, what was I saying here? But outside of the efficiency and Danker beating guys off the dribble, Northern Colorado just ran their action really well. That's why Wisney was able to score the ball, but it was why Danker was able to get as many looks as he was able to. And the Buffs also just struggling with communication throughout non-conference play. Part of the reason why they had been getting beat in transition a few times and been giving up as many points as they have been. That was another issue in this contest, and was part of the reason why they had lost. Just not being attentive to the scouting report, and not being able to communicate, especially in transition and those drag screens. But with a guy like Ibu Yazamaki, he made he made 4 threes, 4 of 6 from beyond the arc, and for 19 points. And he came into this game shooting a decent percentage on like over 5 3-point attempts per game. He's shooting over 35% on the year. And there were multiple times where the Buffs were helping off far too much, trying to take away Wisney or Danker in the pick and roll. And it was just a simple skip pass. I know that happened one time when Wisney was blitzed. One time the Buffs went under a screen, and Yazamaki just rose up and nailed the 3. Or Yamazaki, excuse me. But the Buffs just it was another game of not being attentive to the scouting report, and that's why Northern Colorado was able to shoot 31 of 59 from the field, and 11 of 21 from beyond the arc, and one of the most in a game where the Buffs gave up one of the most amount of 3-pointers they have all season. in a season where they have struggled quite a bit on the defensive side of the floor. But 11 of 21 is not what you want to give up, especially in the second half when it's 5-9 from the arc, and the overall offense 17 of 23 from the floor and down the stretch where Northern Colorado isn't even running action. Denker was just posting up. I think 2 times it was Hargress, but 1 time it was Felix Casares, and he was able to score clutch baskets for the Bears and help them beat Colorado for the first time in nearly 90 years, which was just very kind of insane to watch. But I mean, along with that, while the defense greatly struggled, the Buffs shot under 40% from the field themselves, which adds to how kind of crazy this win is, because the Buffs they had 76 field goal attempts to the Bears 59, but with that horrible shooting percentage and just 7 of 23 from beyond the arc, as the Buffs have kind of struggled shooting the 3-point ball at times this year. In my opinion, I just thought that CU, even though they were looking to play to their strengths, having the height advantage with Bangot Dak, the weight advantage with Elijah Malone, Sebastian Ranchik being a solid driver, the Buffs being usually able to push the pace. Their lack of defense made it hard for them to be able to push the pace. It was harder for them to get the ball up the floor after makes. But while the Buffs, also only had 5 turnovers and tried to score the ball inside, like I was saying, it just seemed like they weren't making shots that they usually made. And the Buffs, at times this year where Tad Boyle has noted the amount of misses at the rim, the Buffs, who were without Alon McKaylee, who was sick on December 28th against the Bears, the Buffs were missing just a decent amount of bunnies at the rim. It seemed like they maybe weren't as going up as strong as they could have, as they have shown against Arizona State and against Utah, as I will talk about in a second. They're kind of going more straight up and kind of flailing, and if they were driving, they were kind of leaning away from the basket instead of going through defender, as we had seen in the Big 12 games. And so that was part of the reason why the Buffs had shot so poorly from the field and struggled in this contest. Excuse me. And then, of course, as we saw, Isaiah Johnson missed a clutch free throw, which would have helped. Sebastian Ranchik missed 2 decent looks from 3-point land, which would have, I think one would have put the Buffs ahead, and one would have tied up the ball game at the end. But, just all around in that game, the Buffs played very, very poorly. Some people talked about Alon McKaylee being out, with how much he had struggled against Arizona State. Of course, you'd like to think he'd be a factor as a guy who'd play in double digits, but, he's kind of up and down with how much he shoots the ball. I think he's a guy who can, you can play a decent amount when he's on, but when he's struggling, he can, he can be kind of hard to play, but I'll talk about that in a second because the Arizona State and the Utah games kind of personified that pretty well, I felt like. But I didn't think that this game necessarily fell on him, even though he's a scorer that could have added to the front court and helped in that ball screen defense and that man-to-man. I didn't think this game necessarily falls on him, and even though I think personally after rewatching the games that the refs were a factor, I thought that Northern Colorado got a few more calls than the Buffs did down the stretch of this contest. Not only on drives, but that one call specifically where Isaiah Johnson had gotten hosed in a few of these games now, but I believe this was the one where the ball was tipped into the backcourt, and him and Danker had both been taken to the floor. I think Johnson may have been the only guy who had fallen, but they had called the foul on IJ, and everyone was in disbelief. But even though the refs were an issue, the Buffs played absolutely horrible. I don't think they'll play a worse game all season, and it takes a really, really special mix of horrid performances for this talented of a team to lose to a school that they haven't lost to in nearly 90 years, even though the Northern Colorado Bears are pretty solid, and guys like Quinn Danker and Brock Wisney and Ibu Yamazaki are solid players. It's just not really understandable how the Buffs could possibly lose a game like that. But moving on and looking at the Big 12, which has brought a lot more optimism as the Buffs have started 2-0 with wins over Arizona State and Utah, two teams that were picked to finish in the bottom of the Big 12 in the Big 12 coaches preseason media poll, right down along with Colorado. Even though I believe the Buffs are the more talented teams, are the most talented team of those three. The Buffs they did what they had to and picked up 2 wins. In the Big 12 where there's a bunch of ranked teams and a bunch of talent and even Arizona State and Utah, if they get hot, can knock off some of these top teams. UCF beat Kansas. I know TCU has played some solid ball games. They were in the game with Kansas, but solid teams across the board in the Big 12, as everyone knows. So the Buffs need to win the games that they can where they know that they're supposed to. Starting with Arizona State, the Buffs hadn't won in Tempe in at least 2 seasons, I believe, maybe more than that. But the thing to talk about with these 2 contests was the zone defense that the Buffs had brought out. I talked about the press a little bit earlier that they'd occasionally shown during non-conference play, but the 1-2-2, they've played it pretty much all of Big 12 play and drop back into a 2-3, and they play it, from what I've noticed, after makes and stoppages of play. That seems to be the easiest to just get to set everything up and to make sure guys aren't scrambling and out of place. It looked like down the stretch of Utah, I think the Buffs maybe on some of those misses where they would usually have gone back into man-to-man, they had gone back into 2-3. Obviously not being able to press on a miss against Utah, but either way, that's kind of what I noticed, is that they were going in the 1-2-2 back into the 2-3 on the makes and stoppages. But either way, that defense has done wonders for the Buffs, who held Arizona State to just 45.6% shooting from the field, and then Utah to 39.4% shooting from the field. Of course, the Sun Devils still reached 89 points, which is a huge margin for a college game. Maybe not nowadays with how high scoring some of these games are, but either way, this is high scoring. I'm just joking. The Buffs, the Buffs, even though Mo Odom went for a big performance with 21 points and 12 assists and a double showing. He kind of struggled in the first half and didn't maybe have the impact that of course, wasn't impact. I'm not saying he wasn't, but there were times where he struggled, and it took a little bit for him to kind of show up to the party, and he had to rely on more of his teammates, like Mukeba, Ali Mukeba and Masamba Diop and Pig Johnson. All 3 of those guys had stepped up, scoring 16 or more points. In Tempe. Even with the Buffs playing this press and zone defense. But either way, making sure that Mo Odom didn't have the easiest time, especially in the first half, as he only made 1 field goal, having to bounce an inbounds pass off Alone McKaylee's back for that first field goal before he had to make some tough shots in the second half. The zone defense did wonders for Colorado and helped them in this contest, even though their offense, saw 4 double-digit scores and a near 50% shooting game from the field, because the zone defense playing against an athletic front court and Alan Mukeba and Masamba Jizope, even though those guys went for solid games, they could be a lot more dangerous in the pick and roll, and they were at times. Arizona State was trying to screen the outside guards on the wings at times, which occasionally led to pocket passes or passes over the top for Mo Odom, which is part of those 12 assists. Whenever the Buffs were falling back into man-to-man, especially in the second half, where they deliberately played some man-to-man after some stoppages sometimes. Mo Odom was finding that pocket pass a little bit to Jizope and to Mukeba, but but either way, the zone was pretty solid, and against Arizona State, who likes to play fast, who's a fairly undisciplined team from what I would say and from what I've seen in their time under head coach Bobby Hurley. They like to play fast. They kind of throw the ball around. They had a lot of turnovers, finishing with 14. But they took some quick threes. They had two guys who really struggled in Bryce Ford and Noah Musin. Those guys were a combined 0 of 10 from the field, with a fair amount of turnovers. But either way, Arizona State, they had the success that I talked about, but they had struggled. Mo Odom didn't have the time that he had wanted. Jizope and Mukeba weren't as solid as they could have been in the pick and roll, and we really saw a lot of the success from those two and Johnson specifically whenever the press was being broken, whenever the ball was able to get into the middle of the floor or kind of into the short corner, and those guys were able to make things happen, either cutting or going kind of one-on-one against a scrambling defense. There were also times where the Buffs, especially Alon McKaylee, just didn't get back on defense in Tempe. Those guys were able to score. The Buffs, whenever they turned the ball over in this contest, as they had 15 turnovers, the Sun Devils were able to run wild on that, which of course doesn't fall back onto the defense. But looking at Utah, the defense, took another step, even though it wasn't, too much difference in terms of the game plan from Arizona State. The Utes, they offered not as much all around talent, but two talented guards in Terrence Brown and Don McHenry. Brown went for 16 points, McHenry for 24. Keanu Dawes, a returner, is also a long, lengthy forward who went for 16 points, 7 rebounds. He's solid at what he does, averaging nearly a double-double. But the Buffs, with their press, they didn't force a horrible amount of turnovers, only 7 in this contest. But it forced Utah to play super, super fast, and outside those 3 that I mentioned, the Utes really had no one to look at as those 3 were trying to do it all. McHenry and Brown were trying to dribble through the zone and took a bunch of shots. Not as much from the 3-point line, but just took a lot of mid ranges, took a lot of floaters and things like that. Took a lot of tough runners and layups, specifically over Bangot Dak, and while the Utes, were solid on the glass, having 15 second chance points, 4 more than the Buffs, they shot under 40% in this contest, and it was just because Brown and McHenry were just, they have a lot on their plate already this season, but it was just too much with the press, being up in their face, causing more traps and things like that, but especially with the zone being kind of packed in, and really limiting, especially when Utah would try and run some pick and roll action. If it was a man-to-man situation after a few miss or a turnover, the Buffs were blitzing that situation pretty heavily, whether it was Brown or McHenry. The Utes, with the struggling aspect of the non-stars, is they only added 17 points in this contest outside of Dawes, McHenry, and Brown. The Buffs were pretty solid, and the Utes only found success kind of whenever the Buffs were turning the ball over with their 11 turnovers. Whenever they get the ball up the sideline into the corner, into the middle of the floor. Everyone knows it's how you break a press or a zone, but the Utes, they were able to do that more at the end of the first half, a little bit at the beginning of the second half, making it a close game. Whenever they really get the ball into the high post in the middle of the 2-3, Dawes was able to get downhill, draw some fouls. When he had made one of the few middies that Utah had made all night, that had brought it to a 2-point game with just 4 minutes left. But Despite that, Colorado stepped up, and the Buffs have swatted quite a decent amount of shots this year between Bangot Dak and Sebastian Ranchik. Dak stepped up with a huge swat, I believe, on the next possession after that Dawes midi, and then that was in the same sequence. Dak had a dunk, which then led to a 16-6 run to close out that game. And Dak on the final few possessions, even though he didn't have another block, was a huge aspect. He forced McHenry to have a carry on the possession after the block. He forced another miss or two from the Utes down the stretch, and so he was big in that game, as he's had back-to-back double doubles to open Big 12 play. But either way, the Buffs defense in both these contests was really solid, especially against Utah, who found minimal success outside of the few times they were getting to the corner or the middle of the zone. Brown and McHenry very occasionally beat guys off the dribble, but between them they took 39 shots for them to score just 40 points, which is not the most efficient 40 points between two guys ever. And both the Utes and the Sun Devils were just kind of sped up, forced to take a lot of shots. That was mostly their fault. It's not like they were playing the most patient. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the effect of the zone defense, and why the Buffs may play it a lot more going forward, and why it might be here to stay, especially because it helps the Buffs so much in the ball screen coverage, where a guy like Elijah Malone, the Buffs have had to switch a decent amount down the stretch of some non-conference games to win. Tad Boyle had said that, I believe, after Portland State or Cal Baptist, one of those games. That was tough. And, in the 2-3, with the only screen action happening on the outside guards, and Elijah Malone standing underneath the rim, in that 2-3, being in the middle of it, he doesn't have to be in any of that action, and is able to be more of an impact and be more of a impact on the boards, I would say, just because he's able to already kind of be positioned instead of having to retreat back from trying to hedge or blitz a pick and roll, even though just because that's hard for him. Danker was getting outside of those containments. Odom got outside of those containments down the stretch of the second half, that also hurts the rebounding aspect for Malone specifically, but for guys like Sebastian Ranchik or Bangot Dak or Alon McKaylee on the outside of that 2-3, it may be a little bit harder for them to rebound. So I believe it will be a little bit interesting. I think it'll be a little bit harder whenever the Buffs play some more athletic front court players and some talented guards. Not saying that Arizona State, specifically they don't have some guys, with Mo Odom and Alan Mukeba and Masamba Jizope, and that's not saying that Utah doesn't have some of their guys, but definitely not as talented as Houston and Texas Tech, like Tad Boyle had mentioned after beating Utah. And I'll talk about Texas Tech in a second. But briefly looking at the offense, because I talk so much about defense. The Buffs, they looked much better than they did in the Northern Colorado game. They looked a lot more patient. They weren't just trying to throw it inside and go straight up right away. And when they were able to play fast, whether it was off turnovers or misses, seeing a lot more in the first two Big 12 games than the Northern Colorado game, they were able to push the pace and just be super, super aggressive. Sebastian Ranchik has shot well, specifically around the rim. He, scored 18 points at Arizona State, went 3-7 from the field, 12-14 from the line. Against Utah, he scored 19 points, 5-11 from the field, 9 of 9 from the line. So two solid games for him. He was just a lot more aggressive. Capped off the Utah game with a great drive, great physical drive over Keanu Dawes, who's one of the better defenders in the Big 12. Even though he was kind of limp and beat up down the stretch of the contest at the CU Event Center. But also looking at Bangot Dak, well, he has scored a little bit more in transition and things like that. Being able to run the floor, and maybe not hasn't been as impactful scoring the ball, even though he had 16 against Utah. He has had the double-double, been effective on the glass, offensive rebounding-wise, whether it's been tip-outs to the guards or Elijah Malone. But specifically against Arizona State, the Buffs just put Elijah Malone in the paint, or the other opposing big, or the other big in the paint, two guys in the corner, and just let either Barrington Hargress or Isaiah Johnson, whoever was going at the time, get a high pick and roll from Bengai Dak. Sometimes Dak just stood there at the top of the key and let Hargress and Isaiah, whoever it was, just kind of go one-on-one, and that kind of threw off Arizona State's ball screen coverage. And there was one thing I noticed throughout the non-conference plays that I felt like Bengai had been able to utilize his body a little bit more and take up more space, seal guys off, and things like that. But that's really come along from in the Big 12 matchups, and had really showed up. Even though the Buffs, didn't really light it up against Arizona State or Utah, only shooting 31%, 33%. Still getting decent looks from the 3-point line. They had some dumb turnovers that I'm only saying dumb because I said they're dumb. It's silly sometimes to step on the sideline out of bounds, or throw some skip pass turnovers, especially late in games. The Buffs had committed some offensive fouls, traveled a few times, so some silly turnovers that had been a little bit more uncharacteristic down the in the earlier part of the season. But in the Northern Colorado game where the Buffs had the Buffs only had 5, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. But against Arizona State, the Buffs had 15, and they had 11 against Utah. And in both of those games, turnovers allowed those struggling offenses to get going a little bit, allowed those games to stay close, even though the Buffs had led by double digits in both of those contests at multiple points. The turnovers are really the only struggling parts of the offense. Because, like I said, they're much better, much more aggressive on the drives. Barrington Hargress, he has been, really impressive throughout the year. He's been as good as advertised. But it was, pretty cool to see, him be him and Isaiah Johnson specifically be so great. Alternatively in Arizona State, with Hargress being good in the first half and Isaiah being great in the second half. Both those two against the Utes, even though they didn't go for the biggest scoring games, Utah, with not the tallest team, more athletic front court players, were trying to blitz the pick and rolls with Sebastian Ranchik and Bengai Dak, who were coming up to screen the CU guards, and CU handled it well despite those turnovers that were silly. The Buffs were able to create off those pick and rolls, whether it was Ranchik and Dak scoring off those more aggressive drives, or kicking out to the 3-point line, which resulted in some 3-point makes, or further drive, further action, stuff like that. There was better ball movement, which goes along with the patience, and things that I was mentioning. Jesus, I need some water, bro. This is horrific. But anyways, I'll try and finish this out. I don't know. I know coaches back in the day didn't let their players get water or whatever, so I've been talking for this much, so I can finish this up. But look into the individuals real quick, and then Texas Tech. I talked a decent amount about BD. Oh my goodness. I talked a decent amount about BD. I talked a decent amount about Hargress and IJ. Talked a good amount about Ranchik. Talked a good about Alone. Josiah Sanders, I hadn't really talked about him. He has played great in the first 2 games of Big 12 play. Same with Jalen Holland. Holland had struggled greatly in the Northern Colorado game. Just kind of had looked a little bit lost, but both him and Josiah had showed up and been factors, similarly to what they had been throughout non-conference play, in the terms of just playing hard and grabbing offensive rebounds, scoring off of drives here and there. But Josiah specifically in this last game went for 9 points, 4 of 6 from the field, and he had some huge buckets. and drew free throws at a big time. I mean, in the first half, he was just a part of the the scoring barrage that the Buffs kind of went on, scoring, I believe it was only 3 points in the first half, but in the second half, had three big baskets. As the Utes were making their run to make it a 2-point ball game with 4 minutes left, Josiah was the reason that the Buffs had kept it a 2-point ball game. So it was great to see him coming along. Jalen Holland, great in the press, grabbed some rebounds. He knocked down a 3 against Arizona State, and had a huge backdoor cut dunk against Utah. Elijah Malone, I talked about a fair amount about him in the press in the zone. The Buffs have been able to hide him a little bit more, just in terms of the pick and roll coverage, but he's still trying to figure things out. He got into foul trouble throughout both these first 2 games, so we haven't seen as much of him. But for him, I believe it's more about whether or not the Buffs can kind of get the ball to him inside into the post. A few times in Arizona State, he struggled against the more athletic front court, but against some smaller guys in Utah, he kind of had his way a little bit whenever he got the ball inside, even though he was only two or three from the floor. He just didn't play too much due to the foul trouble, and the Buffs were having pretty solid offense outside of that. But yeah, that's pretty much all the individuals that played. And gosh, I'm just talking so long. I'm so sorry, but shoot, I owe you all the content. It's been a minute, but to wrap this up, looking at Texas Tech, number 14, Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, who are 1-1 in Big 12 play, 11-4 overall on the season. I'd have to look at what they're ranked in Ken Palm, but number 14 in the AP poll, tells you enough. The Red Raiders are led by their top 2 guys. They have a pretty solid team, but everyone knows they're led by JT Toppin, the Big 12 Conference Player of the Year in the 2024-2025 season, last season. Now in his junior year, he's averaging a 20-point double-double. I believe it is, 20-point double-double. And Christian Anderson, now a sophomore guard. He kind of reminds me of Isaiah Johnson just in terms of his smoothness and his fearlessness, despite his youthfulness and small stature. He's very talented. He's averaging 19 points and a conference-leading 7.5 assists per game. Still 3 turnovers, but he's playing 38.2 minutes per game, leading the Big 12, which is very tough. And so those two, they're leading the Red Raiders. They have a lot on their plate, but joined by Lawan Watts, the preseason Big 12 newcomer of the year, and some talented shooters, and Donovan Atwell and Jalen Petty and a few others. The Red Raiders are ranked number 14 for a reason. I've been only taking some losses to some tough teams in Purdue and Illinois and shoot, I don't remember the other one besides Houston. But either way, Texas Tech, they've played some tough teams, won some big games, and they have some talented players. Like I said, JT Toppin, the 20-point double-double that he's averaging, he's helping hold down the defense, and because of just the prowess that he has, averaging 1.8 blocks a game, being as athletic as he has, they list him at 6'9" on here. I believe he's 6'10", and heavier than the 215 pounds that they weigh him at. But he's athletic. He's blocking a lot of shots, and is a good rim protector, and he's grabbing a bunch of rebounds along with Lawan Watts and some of the other Red Raiders. And so a lot of the teams that have played Texas Tech have had to try and score more from the outside, having to rely more on their jump shot and and things like that. At least from some of the games that I've watched, looking at the first 2 Big 12 games in the Oklahoma State and the Houston games versus Texas Tech. So the Buffs, they'll struggling to make some 3-point shots, even though they're finding some open jumpers. They'll have to make some threes for sure. I know Houston made some very, very tough threes to beat the Red Raiders on Houston's home floor. But a part of that was Kingston Flemings and Milos not really Milos Uzan, but Kingston Flemings and Emmanuel Sharp. Those guys hitting mid-range jumpers off the dribble, just kind of isoing some of those guards and just clearing out, allowing some space. Because if you look at, I believe it's, you look at, Christian Anderson, like I said, he kind of reminded me of Isaiah Johnson, just in his small stature. He's quick. Like IJ is. So I think he can get some steals, but I think the Bucks could go at him like some teams have. Lawan Watts, he's a solid defender, but and so is Donovan Atwell. But Jalen Petty, a 6'1" guard, also 168. He's on the smaller side. He can shoot the heck out of the ball. I'll tell you what, he made a bunch against Houston, but he was more of the one that Houston attacked more so than Christian Anderson on the defensive side of the floor. But either way, it will be a tough game for the Buffs. The big thing will be if their offense is able to produce and come along, they can make some of those shots from beyond the arc. The Red Raiders, they are shooting 37.7% from beyond from the 3-point line on 29 attempts per game. They're making 10.9 3-pointers a game, which ranks number 14 in the nation. Which was a good coincidence and whatnot with their AP poll ranking. But with those 3-point numbers, they get up 3-point shots and get 3-point shots up, and they make them. And that is a big part of their game plan and how they win games. And in games where they have made less than 10 threes, they are just 2-3 on the year. So the Buffs, they've struggled to limit some 3-pointers. Colorado State is the big game that stands out, giving up 18 to 35 against one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the nation. But even looking at Northern Colorado, who made 11 threes, 3-point shooting has been big in some of the Buffs' losses. So if the Buffs can limit that, they'll have a much better chance to try and upset Texas Tech at the CU Event Center on Saturday. But also the key to the other stat that stood out was Texas Tech shot 14 or fewer free throws in all of their 4 losses. They had a few wins with 14 free throws attempted. They've had more and they've had more than that in the rest of their wins, but in all of their losses they had 14 or fewer free throws attempted. And looking at some of those teams like Houston, of course they're defensive minded. Illinois, they have some tall European guys. Illinois, Arkansas, they're not the tallest team, but they, under John Calipari, they're talented, they play hard, they play fast. They, were able to keep Texas Tech from doing what they want. And then Purdue, obviously, with Oscar Clough and Trey Kaufman, those guys are gobbling up rebounds left and right. They're solid interior players, which gave Texas Tech a hard time. And so, the Buffs, who have an array of solid front court players who have some decent skill sets, they may be able to throw some decent decent lineups at Texas Tech and tire them out, especially in the advantage in altitude. With that advantage, and especially if this press, which falls back into the zone, can be as effective as it has been, because even though it is a zone, the Buffs have been pretty solid at speeding teams up and forcing them to miss 3-pointers. So far, if you do the math, teams are just averaging just 31.3% shooting from the 3-point line, as both the Utes and the Sun Devils shot 5 of 16 from beyond the arc, but 10 of 32 on the year between 2 games. I believe the Buffs will take that, and I guess that doesn't meet the statistic that the Buffs would need the less than 10 3-pointers or whatever, if Texas Tech were to shoot 10 of 32. But 10 of 32 wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, given some of the games that the Red Raiders have had from 3-point land, and some of the games that the Buffs have allowed from opposing teams this season. In Colorado State, Northern Colorado, and I believe Alabama State hit 11 threes, even though that was a close game. But either way, I said a bunch, and still this episode was 45 minutes. I I hope that everyone who listened to this enjoyed that a bunch and was able to learn a decent amount from my rewatches, or from what I said, and what I gathered from my rewatches. I had fun looking back and seeing the improvements that the Buffs made with on both sides of the floor, just from the losses to the wins. I mean, the offense, there wasn't as much to note. It was more just seeing the nuance of the Buffs and just kind of seeing the different tools that each player has. With each game, there's a little bit more of a scouting report. Each guy may offer a little bit more, a little bit less than you've seen throughout the season. Like a guy like Alon McKaylee, who got off to a great start. I believe he's someone who can be scouted for fairly easily and can be taken out of some games and may struggle, I think, more so down the stretch of the season. But guys like a guy like Barrington Hargis, who can share the ball but score the ball. Scouting reports, you take away one thing, you might be giving up another with him. So, the offense, there wasn't, as much to talk about, but the defense, of course, with the lack of zone defense, but also the press throughout non-conference play, and then seeing it be successful in Big 12 play, and knowing that Tad Boyle is the biggest fan of zone defense. But seeing that it had its benefits, given how troublesome defense has been for the Buffs throughout non-conference play. He had to talk about it. Had to see what was going on with it, and it definitely may be an answer for the Buffs, who have struggled specifically with their ball screen coverage, and specifically beyond that, getting back on defense and limiting teams if they're able to get back and on defense. They can keep teams from getting in their action and limit themselves from scrambling. But of course, if they're falling back into man to man after turnovers and misses, that may be tough if the offense is struggling. But they have to clean up the offensive rebounding, the opposing offensive rebounding. That was an issue in both contests, with both the Utes and the Sun Devils having some an athletic front court. Of course, JT Toppin, very athletic, and even though the supporting cast isn't the tallest, Lawan Watts and some other guys for Texas Tech like to crash the boards as athletic guys, and who play hard, and who play under a great coach and head coach Grant McCasland. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I actually shot this in one take, which I actually can't believe. This has never happened in my life. And so now I have to send it off with one of my signature rambling goodbyes. But no, I'm just kidding. I appreciate you guys watching another episode or listening to another episode of In the Heyday. I'm your host, Oliver Hayes. And I'll talk to you guys after the Texas Tech game, hopefully giving you guys my instant thoughts and reactions after what will hopefully be an exciting game here in Boulder on Saturday. Yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.